All right, so let's talk about Redux and look at the most simplest, most trivial example that we can think of. It's a hello Redux example. So Redux is a JavaScript library, and that it's not particular to React. You can use it with any number of libraries. You can use it even with Angular, with anything you want. And it implements a particular way of thinking about state, right? That has become very popular in the industry where folks are implementing Redux, right? So yeah, it decouples state management from the actual rendering, where now most components now can just be plain old stateless components, because they're not going to be responsible for maintaining any of the state. Right? Instead, they're going to delegate the state management to a different library. Right? So we're not going to have any more of this constructors where they create the this.state or event handlers that do a this.setState or anything like that. So that's all going to go away. Instead, we're going to have functions that are going to notify this Redux that, hey, something happened. I have no idea what needs to happen. And instead, that's going to live on Redux. Redux will have all the logic that says, okay, well, if this was the state and this happened, then this should be the next state. Right? It'll be we're going to centralize the logic of like a diagram, like a state diagram. That's basically what it is. Redux allows you to encode a state diagram, finite state machine that says, if you're in this state and this things happen, then this should be the next state. Right? And it generates a history of all these states. Right? So as you navigate through all the possible states that your application can be in. Okay? So first of all, we'll need to install. We'll go into whatever application we're in, and we're going to install Redux. So first, let's create a really trivial application just to demonstrate this. Tools, let's see where I am. WebDev, 2019, spring. And let's see, in here we're going to create Hello Redux. Oh no. npm install create React app. I don't even know what version of Node do I have. Uh-oh. I think it's answering. Let's see. npm nvm. Oh my God, this is 0.10. nvm use 10. Okay, let's try it again. There we go. Okay, so we have create React app, and so let's create Hello Redux. There we go. Okay, that looks promising. So once we've done that, we can install. We're going to need two libraries. One of them, the Redux library, is the core library that can be used for any for any front end framework that we want. So not only React, but it could be used also for Angular or any other one, right? The second one, React-Redux, is specific for React. Right? This is the glue that allows React applications to use the Redux library. Right? So let's install both of them. So let's go into, that's still going. While that's going, we're going to create a really simple hello component. That the only thing that's going to do is just going to render hello. Notice that we're going to insist on using stateless components. Right? You might want to use stateful component if perhaps you want to create a component that maintains its own little state. It doesn't have any interactions with anything else. Maybe a little form. Right? Maybe a form that has a couple of fields, and you want to do some validation as you type. And once you know that everything's okay, it would then expose its state to Redux and say, okay, well, this is the resulting after having validated all this form. Here's the result of submitting this form. Right? So you might create a stateful component that has its own little substate, right? But not have components that might be nested with one another and share states across multiple components. Make sense? So stateful components is still okay to maintain small states within it, but not if you're going to do cross communication, you would use Redux instead. Okay, so let's go into Redux and let's just make sure this is running. Okay, so it looks like that is going to run. Meanwhile, let's install Redux and React Redux in a different tab. npm use10. There we go. So it's going to download Redux and install it as a dependency, and we're also going to need the other one, React Redux. Let's see if that loaded. Okay, so it did load, so we're okay. Looks like we're okay. Let's see. So that's still downloading Redux, and let's install now React Redux as well. Yes.
You have to install it every time, or just the first time you use it?
In the project, only once, right? Although you can include it global.
Do you have to install it?
No, you can install it globally, right? And it'll link it. It'll declare as a dependency, but it won't copy the libraries onto node_modules. It'll be one single place. But it'll still declare as a dependency so that when you deploy it in Heroku, it will download for that particular project. Okay, so great. So let's create our very first application and render just hello. Let's do that. So let's under components, let's create hello.js. Let's open up our favorite IDE. And let's close a couple things here. And let's open up, let's see, where are we? WebDev, 2019, Spring, Hello Redux. There we go. Let's open that up. And let's create a, under source, let's create a file under components, hello.js. Right, and let's create our hello world application. I'm just going to copy it. All right. All right, so let's now bring that into our app application. We can just blow away our existing application. We just blow it away and just start from scratch. And instead create our own little index page, index file. And in there, just bring in that hello component. And let's see if that renders our hello. Okay, everybody okay, right? So this is trivial. No surprises there. All right, so let's talk about the way we're gonna build this. So we're gonna have a component. Oh, that's supposed to be boxes. I think the gray is too light. Jeez. All right. So basically, what's going to happen is that we're going to have someone who's going to be responsible for telling us what is the current state, right? And that's going to be called the reducer, right? The reducer is going to calculate what should be the next state, right? It'll generate a state that somehow is going to eventually be notified to the components. And the components, the only thing that the components will ever receive is a property passed in as an argument. So that's the only thing that the component can ever receive or communicate with the outside world is through through properties, and it will not maintain any of its own state. The state will always be passed in to the component through its properties. It will not have any internal representation of its own data. Right? It's not responsible for maintaining its own data. Anything that happens, it will have to notify the reducer. Something happened. Tell me what the next state should be. All right. Okay. So let's start building a couple of these things. So first of all, we're gonna extend our little hello world so that it can be passed in what the state should be. Right. Instead of just printing out the hard-coded hello, it'll be passed in some state that has the value for the message they will want to print. Pretty simple. So let's do that. Let's just parameterize it into our hello. There we go. And so somebody needs to be able to inject the data in there, the state in there. Right? And here's where the reducer comes in. The reducer is, again, just a simple function, right, whose responsibility is to tell me what the next state is. When it returns, whatever it returns, that is the next state of the application. Right? And internally, it'll have all sorts of switch statements and logic that, depending on events, it'll decide, oh, this should be the next state. Right now, it'll be a trivial function. So let's create it under the reducers directory, under here. And in there, we're just going to copy this function. It's just a function. It's nothing weird about it, right? Notice that this is a function, and the only thing that it does is that it's returning that new object, right? That has a name and a value. Now this one has this says that the state is the object, and inside we can put whatever we want. Right? And the components will be notified, and each component is responsible for interpreting that state any which way they want. Okay. All right. So somehow we need to go from this function generating the next state to connecting it to this component. Right? Somehow we need to make that glue between the two. Right. And the glue is containers. The containers are the glue between these two worlds. The container's responsibility is to make the connection between the Redux world of states, right, and the React world of properties. Properties and, well, state as well. But since React is not going to handle the states, really the only glue is properties. Right? So somehow we need to the container will map what the states that the reducer generates to the properties that the components need for rendering. Okay? And that's what containers do. So containers take the state, massage it, and then render it, and then provide it as properties to the components for rendering. Right, so let's do that. Let's create the container, the hello container. Right, the hello container. Right. In here, we'll need React. We'll also need the component that we are going to feed it the state, as a property. Right? So we're going to have to connect, right, the states that are being generated by Redux and pass them as properties to the components. So for every component that needs to render and needs data, there will be a container, right, providing the state and doing the mapping. Right? And the mapping is done by a function called connect, an appropriate name. That is implemented by the React-Redux library. This is the React. Remember, there's the Redux library, which is the core, and then there is a React-Redux, which is the glue between the two. And connect is what makes the glue. It says, okay, give me the state, and I'm just going to pass it to as a property, right? So we need to create a function that does this, that does the mapping, and we're appropriately going to be calling it the state to property mapper, right? That's exactly what it's doing. It's taking the state from the reducer and it's passing it as a property to a component, right? So this function's responsibility is to do the mapping between these two worlds that not necessarily have to be the same. The schemas might be different, right? The state might be, fairly normalized, right? It might be very hierarchical, right? It might have many levels, right? Because it's the state of the entire application. But a component might only need a really small subset, yes? Or it might it might need to aggregate a couple things, right? Where the state might have an array of very complex objects, the component might just need an aggregate of all those, of an entire array or collections, right? So here is where the mapping between these two worlds might happen, right? Where you might say, well, I don't want to pass the entire state. I might, I would like to be able to navigate down to this, sub element down here, take these arrays, massage it, and now pass what the component actually needs as a property. Make sense? We're not going to do that. We're just going to go blindly going to map the state to the property, right? Because we have a very trivial state, right? We just have a message object with a hello world value, right? We're just going to map it to a property also called message, right? So we're going to say, hey, take the message state, the message attribute in the state, and map it to the property that is also called message. Right, so this is what it's doing. Yes? The reducer is going to generate that state. Yeah, we'll show you in a minute. Yeah, the connect does that. The connect does magic. So the connect, right, is the responsible that says that is going to do the connection between the two. It says the connect is going to say, take what's this mapper, take this mapper. I will pass the state to this function. I will pass the state to this function, and we'll see in a minute how that happens. The mapper will come back with what the property should be, what the mapping should be, right? And then I will now pass those properties that came back from the state mapping, right? And I'll pass it down to the component, right? And the component in this case is the hello component, right? As an argument there, okay? Right? It's gonna right now the connect actually takes two arguments, right? The first argument is the mapper of the state. Am I yelling? It does the objects. It takes each one of the objects in the state, right, and it passes those properties down to the component. So that's the first argument. The second argument deals with dispatching events. As you click and drag and interact, right, all those events are going to be generated inside of the components. Right, the components will have on clicks, on change, on. Right, it's going to be generating as you interact with the UI, right? So all those events are going to have to trickle from the component. It's going to be trickling, and it's going to be they need to be handled at some point. They need to be passed to the reducer. Say, hey, reducer, this happened. What should be the next state, right? So the connect is going to do that a little later. We're going to do that in a minute, but that will be the second argument. The second argument to connect is what do I do with all these events, right? I need to send them to the reducer, right? So it's a circle. It's I pass the state to the component. The component generates events, goes back to the reducer, which generates the next state that I map it to the properties, generates events through the properties to the reducer, and so on and so forth. It just goes on and on. So right now we're just going one way, from the state down to the component. Notice that the container, the hello container, is not responsible for any UI. Right? It's not rendering any tags. It's not rendering anything. Right? Its only responsibility right, is to contain the element that is actually going to do the rendering, okay, through a connect. All right, okay, we have that. All right, the next part is that the store provider. So the store provider is the glue that we needed, the final glue. Okay. The final glue that connects all this is that as the reducer is generating all these events, right? All these events are being streamed, right? They're being generated and stored in a store where it has all the history of everything that has happened up to this point that would allow us to, for instance, go back to a previous state and fast forward or reverse and whatnot, right? And so the store is what contains the current state and any prior states that might have been in there, right? So we need something that represents this store. That's where the states go. They're dumped. The reducer dumps that new state into the store, and the store then needs to be connected to the application, right? And then the application uses the containers to pass all those states and map them to the properties of the components, right? So let's do that last piece of creating this the store and the provider. So what we're going to do is that we're going to grab the reducer at the top level. So in the index at the top level, we're going to grab the reducer. There it is. We grab the reducer. We're going to tell the reducer, hey reducer, create a store for me. Give me a store where you're going to be feeding all these states. I will now pass it to the application. It will trickle down to the containers, and the containers will connect them and map them to the components. Right? So that's the reducer. That's the reducer. Then we're not going to actually render the component, the hello component, anymore. Instead, we're going to render the container. Right? We're going to start with the container. So the components no longer can function on their own. Right? They're dependent on somebody providing the state to it. Right? They can only exist within the context of a container that provides the states to them. Right? So there's no point of actually trying to render the component on its own. Right? It can only live inside of a container that's going to map the state so that it can through the properties. So let's grab the container. Let's grab the container. We're going to get rid of the hello in a minute. And then we're also going to grab the create store function. Right? The create store function is what's going to tell the reducer, hey reducer, I know you can generate all these states for me, right? Dump all those states in this store. Right? The store is going to be the one that contains all the states so far, in particular the current state, and then take that store and just pass it on to the application. So let's do that. We're going to create the store. We'll grab the provider in a minute. So we're going to create the store. Take the reducer, create a store, and now this store needs to be provided to the application. It says, hey application, here's the store who's generating all these states. Pass it along to all the containers. The containers will pass it along to all the components. Okay? So this is all plumbing. Right? This is the most boring part of Redux, is doing this first initial plumbing. Right? And once the plumbing is done, then it becomes more fun. This is the not fun part of doing all this plumbing. All right, so now we're going to take the provider. We take the provider, which I forgot to grab. So let me grab the provider. Notice that the provider The provider lives in the React-Redux library. See that? That's the glue, right, between the generic or the high-level core Redux store, right, and all the state generation and whatnot, and then glues it. It's the glue into the React world that has components and containers and properties and all that, right? So the provider is the abstraction level that does this glue between these two worlds. And what it does is that it grabs the store generated by the reducer and then feeds it into the containers, into any one of the containers that then will feed it down to the components. All right, so let's do that. I'm going to replace this. There we go. All right. So let's see if this blew up. It did. Hello container expected instead, so an expression. Hello container. So what's wrong with my container? I'm sorry? Hello container. In components. Container. Hello, where? I'm sorry? Hello container, container, so it's a function, export, was there, line 6, expect an assignment, line 6, expected, oh, wait a minute, I think I need a parenthesis here maybe? There we go, I need a parenthesis. Yeah, there we go, so hello world, no big deal, other than the reducer here is sending hello world, right? So hello world, life is good. So whatever state that generates, right? It's being mapped to the properties. The properties are then passed down to the component, and the component only receives that one message, which then uses to render. Make sense? Right, so we've decoupled. Right? React no longer is handling any state whatsoever. Right? It's only doing the mapping. It says, well, give me the state. I'll send it over to the component. Right? What this allows us to do, or why it has become so popular, is that now React can all the React components can be all stateless. Right? They don't need to maintain any of the states. And stateless components or stateless functions are so much easier to test. Right? You can isolate them all by themselves, right? Because they don't have any dependencies with anyone else. Right? So you could test it by just passing whatever you want and then checking to see if it's behaving the way you expect it to behave. If it would have its state, that means that it would remember things as you send it different values, right? And it changes all different states. That makes it much harder to test, since you have to first make sure to put the component in the correct state before checking to see if it's behaving the way you would expect it. When it's stateless, right, unit testing becomes so much more trivial, and you can automate all these tests. So it has become really very popular in industry. Did that eradicate? Did I lose anybody? Right. Again, I know there's a lot of plumbing. We're gonna do a little more plumbing. We're gonna go the other way around. So we went one way of sending state over from Redux all the way down to a component for rendering. Now we're gonna go the other way around. Right? We're gonna see that the component can also send something back to the reducer for the reducer to calculate the next state. Right? So we'll do that next.